So, starting off, who wants to introduce it?
I don't know.
Rock, paper, scissors?
Okay, rock, paper, scissors.
On shoot or before? Do we do shoot?
On shoot, because we
On
are
shoot.
not barbarians.
I see. And yes, okay.
Okay, ready?
Shoot.
Try again.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Aha! All right. Hello, folks. I am Nolan McCausey.
And I'm Colton Wesley.
And we are adults.
Yeah, I guess we are.
Or we pretend to be.
We play adults on TV.
Yes. Watch our new channel. We are adults. And that is also the name of our podcast. We have decided about 25 minutes ago.
Not even.
Maybe.
Like maybe 10 minutes ago we came up with this.
Yep.
20 minutes ago? I don't know.
Yep.
In the very recent, like within the past half an hour,
not too distant past.
we came up with the name of this podcast. It was actually Nolan who came up with the name of the podcast.
Yeah.
If we're being fair.
Yeah. Give me credit where it's due, punk.
Yeah, exactly. I'm giving Nolan his credit. So we'll start. I think we should start by introducing each other. I'm Colton. That's Nolan. Nolan is, we met as freshmen at college. During the week of orientation,
Many
we
years
met,
ago.
became good friends. Yeah, shoot, that was a while ago now.
4.5 years ago.
Good grief. We actually are adults now. Since then, we both graduated, and we're navigating the world of not being in college anymore.
Yeah.
So
It's real. It's real.
Yeah,
All of you college students, it's real.
there is, in fact, life after college, and it's kind of weird. Like we work jobs and stuff, and we're both going to grad school at some
We
point.
work jobs.
Yeah.
I play music and you write.
Yep, basically. We're artists. Kind of.
Yeah. And we are starving. Please send us money.
Always send the money. We will have a Patreon at some point if this thing picks up any steam, because, I mean, we do need the money. So, I guess I'll introduce Nolan. Nolan is Nolan McCausey. He graduated from Great Lakes. He's a musician. He's the most talented musician that I know. He's one of my best friends. And one of the most genuine people you will ever meet. He's a really good guy. So now that we've fawned over Nolan.
My turn. And that is Colton. Colton Wesley, descended from the great Protestant theologian, teacher, etc., etc.
I mean, one would hope.
Yes.
I hope so.
Yes.
I hope I am. I don't actually know
Great
this.
heritage. And he is also an awesome dude, one of my best friends. He is a writer, sports writer specifically. He does a lot of stuff online. Maybe we can have some links to that somewhere.
Sure.
Something.
I think there's like a description or
Read
something.
his stuff. He gets paid.
Yes, I do get paid if you click on my things.
He is a sports nut, currently wearing his Lions t-shirt and Lugnuts hat.
I mean,
Represent.
You have to represent, especially the Lugnuts, man. I mean, opening day is Thursday, and we're actually going.
Yes.
to opening day.
Yes.
I'm very excited. So, I guess we have a podcast now.
Yeah. This has been something in the works for all of 3 weeks.
Something
2
like
weeks.
that. I think I went to Nolan and said, "Hey, Nolan, we should make a podcast." And Nolan was like, "Yeah, we should totally do that."
Yeah, why not? I mean, because we are adults now and we have so much else to do.
We are, in fact, adults. As of about 15, 20 minutes ago, we are officially adults.
Yes.
And this podcast is now officially a thing. So, speaking of arrivals,
yes,
flawless segues are my jam.
That was
they are my specialty.
You are clever, sir.
Extremely. We're going to talk about a movie that I saw last week. Nolan has been badgering me to watch this movie for a while.
Yes, it's about time.
And it's called Arrival. Hence, the awesome segue. And Nolan saw it and thought it was outstanding. Said it was a really great film. Wanted me to see it.
And then he made fun of me and said I was wrong and
I didn't say you were wrong. I did not say you were wrong.
Just to give you a synopsis, it's like Alien movie. I can't tell you like the actors or the directors or the company. I know the one dude who plays Hawkeye is in it.
And Amy Adams is in it.
Yeah, the one girl who's Superman's girlfriend in one of those movies. Yeah.
Is she? I don't know. The only thing I saw her in before this was Night at the Museum.
I think so.
So
Anyway, so basically, aliens come to Earth, as they do in so many films.
Mm-hmm. Pacific Rim notwithstanding.
Hey, that's a great
we will have the Pacific Rim conversation.
Yes. So they come to Earth, very, very mysterious, don't do anything, just kind of hover there in different areas around the Earth. And basically the whole movie is us trying to communicate with them and figure out what they're here for, what they want to do. And the different nations, different approaches, and this impending rise of tension as we see certain nations begin to act aggressively towards them, and the imminent danger of extinction of all humankind, presumably.
And you say that the whole movie is about, humans trying to communicate with these, alien invader things. And if that were the case, this would be a fantastic movie because it has a very out of the silent planet kind of feel to it.
There's our plug for C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, absolutely. Read the Space Trilogy if you haven't.
Please.
It's woefully underrated and
so
not well known about because Chronicles of Narnia stole all of the thunder.
Thanks, Disney.
Yeah, no kidding.
Just please don't try to make a movie.
Please don't make an Out of the Silent Planet film unless you're going to do it right. But anyway, getting back on to something that people might have actually read/watched. It has a very academic and very philosophical flair to it.
This is not a shoot 'em up aliens film.
No, this is not Life.
This is not Pacific Rim.
It's not Pacific Rim either. There are the response by the humans is relatively reasonable, although I would argue that perhaps the military, and you pointed this out when we talked about this last week, would not have given, earlier this week I guess, would not have given the linguists and the philologists that much time to try to communicate with the aliens before probably attacking it.
Right. I don't remember how much time did pass the movie.
It was at least a month.
It was
a significant portion of time, and that bit might have been a little bit long. But I mean, you have to suspend some disbelief in order to have this story at all.
It's a movie about aliens.
So, but this is where it gets weird. So, by the way, we're definitely entering spoiler territory. So, if you haven't seen it yet, first of all, this movie won like all of the awards last year or something.
Did it?
I think so. It won something.
I'm gonna look it up now.
All right, Nolan's gonna look up what awards Arrival won. But apparently it was a big deal I think it was last year when it came out. So if you haven't seen it by now, what is the rule, by the way, for spoilers? Like, how long do you have before?
There's a rule? 5-second rule.
I mean, it can't be 5 seconds. That's a bit.
I mean, I don't know. It depends on if we're counting the internet into this.
Yeah, that's a bit small of a time gap. Like, you literally have 5 seconds to watch this entire film. But seriously, how long? So when a film is released, how long do you have before you just kind of disregard the spoiler talk? Like, if you were going to watch this film, you would have watched it by now, kind of thing.
Does it depend on the movie? Maybe, like if it's like an obscure, like Chocolate or
is Chocolate that obscure?
I would consider it more obscure.
Fair enough.
And the point is, depending on the obscurity, like if it were a Star Wars film, like you're expected within the first 2 months to know what everyone's talking about.
That's fair.
But if it's like Babette's Feast, then you're presuming that the person has never seen the movie ever, period.
Right, because it is in Danish.
Right, exactly.
The best Danish film I've ever seen, by the way. Also the only Danish film I've ever seen, but it is a fantastic film.
The only thing I know of Danish is Danishes.
Yeah, and Copenhagen, I guess, is the capital.
Is Amsterdam in?
That's in the Netherlands.
Oh, is it?
Nolan.
What is Danish? Is it? What's the name of the country?
Denmark.
Denmark? I'm sitting here going, it's not Danish. Oh boy.
The country is one large pastry.
One thing you should know about us: we were homeschooled. And I did not focus my studies on geography.
I, on the other end, absolutely did. So all of the capitals that Nolan doesn't know.
Or countries, apparently.
I will probably know. And all of the everything else that I don't know is probably what Nolan will know.
Yes.
So I'm the resident capitals and countries expert on this podcast, and Nolan is the resident pretty much everything else expert on this podcast.
That's a lie.
So anyway, okay, that we've established. Have we established that we're beyond?
Yes. This was like September of last year.
Okay, so it's about 7 months.
Yeah, something like
8 months. Fair enough. That's long enough. So, film comes out. Film is released. We watch film. I watched film this week, a few days ago. And so, like Nolan was saying, if the film had been about us trying to communicate with aliens, if that had been the whole story, we would have had a fantastic film. And for the first 2/3 of the film, that is exactly what we had. It was Ransom on Mars. It was this philologist, professor,
certainly not John Carter on Mars,
language expert, played by Amy Adams, trying to discern the language of these alien heptapod things. And it's a fascinating language too, because they're expressing full ideas, full clauses in a single character.
Mm-hmm.
And those characters have so much nuance to them, and it's really clever. And I really liked the way it was done. And because we don't know what kind of language extraterrestrial life might have. I mean, shoot, they're probably not going to have the subject verb object thing going on that we do in English. Or, I mean, it's hard enough for English speakers to understand the nuances of other languages just based on parts of speech and sentence structure, things like that. So for Arrival to create a language for these aliens that is so clever and is so
other.
It is so other. It's so different from human language, yet it's understandable and perceivable. It was cleverly done. So first 2/3 of the film are all about that, and then we get to this weird trippy thing
Dun, da, da, da.
where
spoilers
for some reason, like, so at this point in the film, like there was an attack on one of the alien ships by some rogue military people, and the aliens reasonably freak out and they retreat several hundred feet into the air, and their ship's just hovering over the ground. Adams goes out to, or the character played by Adams goes out to the ship. A capsule lowers from the ship. She enters that capsule and is taken up into the ship. And then she's like standing in this like weird swirly place where the heptapods are. And because before then they'd been on opposite sides of a glass speaking to each other through this strangely written language. And now they're on the same side of the glass for the first time, and she is talking to the heptapods, who apparently have learned how human speech patterns work, so they can understand what she's saying. And they tell her that they have come to give a gift, and apparently this gift is their language. Which, okay, fine. Like, oh, what great thing does this language do that our language can't do? We're going to be better communicators. This is great. No, this language lets you do wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff. It's time travel language. It's
after a fashion.
She's able to like see the future, and
the concept is, because the language is a circular language, and the whole movie is built on the premise, which is a debatable premise, I'm told, by a linguist friend of mine. We'll have to have him on the show at one point. But it's built on the premise that the way you speak, the language you use, impacts the way you think and the way you see reality to some degree. And so because this language is circular and doesn't have a beginning point and an end point, the idea is that once you understand how to speak that language, you suddenly view time in that way, so you can see backwards and forwards. So not time travel per se, but time perception.
Fair enough. Okay, so we'll call it time perception. You are still able to see the future.
Yes.
If you can speak this language. That is... No.
This podcast is brought to you by That Language, helping you see your past, present, and future.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Here's the thing. And as someone who like studies literature academically, someone who appreciates good literature, appreciates good stories, if you're going to just drop something, and oh, by the way, this universe has this capability, if you're just going to drop that in there, you have to talk about it in the first few minutes of your film. You know, if your story has this capacity for something that is so other, especially in a world, they carefully crafted a world that was ours,
believable.
Like they intentionally, they used the names of countries that actually exist. You know, they, you know, the military was present during the story.
It was like Godzilla. Not really. That didn't work. I went for it.
Fair enough. I haven't seen it, so I'm assuming you're talking about the new one. I don't know.
Classic, dude. Classic
okay,
Godzilla
fair enough.
Costume. That yes.
So anyway, where were we?
Countries that are real.
Thank you. So they spend so much time creating this very real universe. If you're going to do that, you can't just turn around and change something fundamental about our understanding of the universe. If you're going to create a universe for your story that is essentially our universe and go into meticulous detail and be so cautious and careful about creating a universe that is accurate and represents ours accurately, you can't just 2/3 of the way through the movie throw us this crazy nonsense. At that point, you're not creating a science fiction, or you have, up to this point, you haven't really been creating a science fiction film so much as a supposal of this. What would it be like if, in fact, there is such a thing as extraterrestrial life, which there very well may be. You know, what if it visited us, which it very well might. Like, I mean, the odds of that aren't great, but they're possible. So you've created this universe, you've created this scenario in our real universe, and then you throw time perception just as this random thing into the story, and it just derails the whole thing. The plot changes, the story changes, the point of the story changes. It's all turned on its head and doesn't make any sense at that point. And
to be fair, they did hint that this was happening. It was random in the sense that, yes, it's so far out there in the bounds of possibility that it's like, what the heck just happened? At the same time, they did hint that it was happening. And if you watch it again, you see like, oh, okay, I know what's going on.
Sure. They did hint at what was happening.
Story-wise,
it's not poorly written. It's just, I don't like that
out
plot
of place.
Twist just felt so, that plot twist just came so out of the blue, and it fundamentally changed what was going on in the story. It fundamentally changed the universe of the story, which I know that was the point.
Right.
But I don't know.
It did.
It's a good story, but that's the kind of thing that I would like to have seen in a film that didn't have this great element of talking about language. Mm-hmm. Because they were doing such a good job with that. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, like, all that work that they put into 2/3 of the film talking about language, it doesn't matter anymore, because the beauty of the language isn't the beauty of the language. It's now, oh, this language lets you see all of time, which that was just too much for me.
And I agree with you too. The resolution was a little bit like Timaeus Ex Machina. Like, I sound super. I'm really not that snobbish. I just sound like it sometimes.
I mean, the podcast is called We Are Adults. Like,
it feels like they're taking that time element, and the resolution is like, you know, China's about to attack the alien ship, and it's going to be bad, and bad things are going to happen. And then suddenly, because she knows the future, she knows that she needs to call this ambassador, because the ambassador or the general or whatever in the future tells her what she told him in the past. So she tells him, and because she tells him something his dying wife told him or something, like, China calls off its military. It's like, it's a little bit, it's not the most satisfying resolution. I agree with you on that.
It really wasn't a satisfying resolution at all. And again, like, if the story had been about, like, if she had discovered this about their language in the first 10 minutes of the film, you know what I mean? You can't just throw a plot twist like that. You can't if that's a part of your universe, you need to make sure that part of your universe has been, you know, we need to be aware of that being a part of the story's universe in the first 10 minutes, or when you throw it at us later on, it's just going to be confusing, and it's just gonna it's gonna skew the rest of the story because you've spent so much time building up this thing, and then you just tore it down. But you're right, it didn't feel satisfying. It wasn't, because, and if they had talked about the time perception element, if she had discovered the time perception element in the first 20 minutes of the movie, then all of a sudden, that becomes the plot, and now she has to find a way to use that to change what's going to happen. But as it happens, the whole plot of the actual plot of the film isn't about her discovering the language. The plot of the film is she discovers the language. Now what?
Right.
So it's...
All that being said, we should probably talk about, I think, the point of the film.
Yeah.
There's a side story that's really the main story, I think, or at least it asks the primary question. I do think the movie's attempting to ask questions. It doesn't answer them. Movies, I don't think, have to do that. I think as long as they're asking the questions to get us thinking, then at least they're doing something beneficial. But the whole question is, because she sees this future, and she sees her daughter, and she sees the life of her daughter throughout this film, and her daughter ends up dying of some disease that's horrible and dies very young. And so the question comes down to, okay, now that she's seen that future, does she and this other main character, Hawkeye, whatever his name is, I forget. I should probably look that up.
The other guy in the story,
yes,
who is essentially working with her. She's a linguist. He's a scientist. They're working together to try to understand the language of the aliens, and of course they succeed. And in so doing, apparently they fall in love.
Yes, which was believable. It made sense. They did well.
Sure.
The question became, do they have a child? And her knowing this future where she sees that her child will have this disease, do they go forward and have the baby? Or because of the pain and heartache that it's going to cause them, and her knowing that her husband will leave her when he finds out, because she doesn't tell him that the child's going to die in the future.
Right, and when she tells him that she can see the future, he decides that's too much and leaves her.
Right.
At some point in the future, like she's seeing this.
Yes, it was weird.
It's weird, and hopefully we're not describing this in an absolutely bizarre sense that doesn't make any sense. I love the question it asks, because it's a fantastic question. We ask the question all the time, if you could go into the past, would you change anything? Almost universally we say yes.
Right.
Because we all would change things about the past, but the future. What if you could see the future? And if you could see the future, one, would you want to? Which is a fantastic question in of itself. But two, if you could see the future and you knew what trajectory your life was going to take, would you make the choices going forward to get you to that point? Or would you want to change the future? And also, and this is presuming something else, though, which it also makes, this is why time travel stories, I have such a hard time with time travel stories. So we've presumed then that, so if she sees the future, if the future is in fact set, this movie doesn't talk about multiverse. So it assumes more or less that time is linear. So, or at least it seems to. So if that's the case, there's only one future. So if she can see that one future, she can't change it anyway. She's fated.
Presumably.
But the dialogue in the story seems to suggest that she has a choice. So now what is this? So if she can see the future, but she can also alter the future by seeing the future, she hasn't actually seen the future. She's seen a future that could be a la the final ghost in A Christmas Carol. Right. You know, this is the future that could be if you go along a certain trajectory, but if you choose a certain other trajectory where you don't marry this guy and you don't have this child, then obviously the child will never exist and you'll never experience that heartache, but you also you'll never be his wife, you'll never be her mother. Right. So
is it worth it, is essentially.
Right. And while it's a good question, the premise is really hard to get around because it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. And also, like, certain, like you was talking about, certain series presume a certain view of how time travel works, and if they do, it's good. Like Ghost of Christmas Future shows him a possible future. It's stated up front. This is a possible future.
Mm-hmm.
So you're automatically
seeing the future.
Right. You're automatically working on that foundation. They establish it within the story. It's kind of the same thing with Doctor Who. Like, Doctor Who doesn't seem to have like, and I'm not a huge Whovian, so you are more than welcome to write me in with furious letters and tell me that I'm wrong and that I'm gonna, burn for all eternity. But
we have an email. weareadultspodcast@gmail.com. We just set that up like 5 minutes before we started.
We got it.
So it's officially our email address. So email us, weareadultspodcast@gmail.com. Email and yell at Nolan for his bad Doctor Who opinions.
Please, I'll take it. But it seems that in Doctor Who, it doesn't really worry a ton. There are a couple storylines where it's like, oh, this is a continuous storyline. And then there are other episodes where it's like, hey, we don't really care. We're just time traveling. But because you kind of expect weird, crazy things from Doctor Who, you don't really care. You don't really care that there's no stated, oh, this is how time travel works. It just happens. You don't mind.
It's sort of like Monty Python.
Yes.
Like in Monty Python, when something ridiculous happens,
help, I'm being repressed.
You don't care.
Right.
Because it's been established from the get-go that this doesn't make sense.
Right.
So if it doesn't make sense from the get-go, who cares about the continuity of the universe, But like Arrival tried to create something that was really continuous and then kind of strayed from that.
Yes.
Which is why I didn't dislike the film. I don't dislike the film predominantly because it asks really good questions and it does talk about language in a beautiful way.
Mm-hmm.
The ending was not good, and the ending is so important to a story.
I liked it a bit more than he did.
Yeah, Nolan definitely liked it more than I did.
I liked it more than he did. That's okay. And I will say as a side note, I'm sitting here looking at the names of the tracks for the album.
The music was great.
And there's one track called Xenoanthropology, and I'm like, yes.
Oh my goodness.
That's the name of one of the tracks.
Xenoanthropology. That's a fantastic word.
As opposed to the final track, which is called Kangaroo.
Maybe that will be the name of this first episode.
The episode, yeah.
That will be the name of this first episode, which has obviously not been named yet, but you, dear listener, you will know the name before you even start the podcast, which will be after we know the name, but before we know the name in your experience of us recording this podcast.
But if you learn the Septipod language, you will know long before anyway. It'll just happen. You'll just know the future, and you'll know that you'll know before we know we're even doing a podcast.
Yeah, wow.
You're probably already seeing it right now if you know the language.
Yeah. Wow. If anyone out there can translate this into heptapod.
I couldn't find a list of the awards the movie won. On Rotten Tomatoes, apparently, according to Wikipedia, which I'm not allowed to cite in college, but I'm not in college anymore. Suck it. So, on Rotten Tomatoes, he received an approval rating of 94% and an average rating of 8.4 out of 10.
Oh, yeah. The critics loved it.
Good.
And I don't blame them for loving it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's gorgeously filmed. Like, the color palette is really nice.
We have to understand, we approach movies very critically.
Oh, yeah.
That's Colton even more so than me. So we're very critical in our approach to it, but at the same time, we don't want to downplay. Like, it was a great movie. We loved watching it.
It's gorgeous. It's entertaining. It's well acted. The music is excellent. There are so many good things about this film, but my goodness, the plot twist didn't ruin the film for me, but it definitely took it down a peg.
Yeah. Wikipedia just sent me off on a side link that I'm going to mention. Linguistic relativity. I'm just going to read right from their page. The principle of linguistic relativity holds that the structure of a language affects its speaker's worldview or cognition. Popularly known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, or Whorfianism, the principle is often defined to include two versions. The strong version says that language determines thought, and that linguistic categories limit and determine cognitive categories, whereas the weak version says that linguistic categories and usage only influence thought and decisions. So,
well, I think that it certainly at least influences thought.
I would agree.
I mean, because we have a word for words that don't exist. Like, if you're trying to describe something that there is not a word to describe, it is literally indescribable by language, we call that thing a lacuna. And I'm going to double check actually to make sure that we call that a lacuna, because I don't want to get corrections on our very first podcast.
Especially with you being a linguist.
Yeah.
A writer.
Yeah.
Come on, man. Come on.
This up. A lacuna is a lexical gap in a language. Okay, thank you,
Lacuna
Wikipedia.
Matata. Sorry.
You're fine. You're fine. So yeah, it's a gap in language, essentially, which is actually what Wikipedia calls it, a gap in language, which is where I got that because.
Dang, we're citing Wikipedia up and down today.
You know what? All the times we wanted to cite Wikipedia and couldn't in college.
It just has to come out.
There is so much Wikipedia built up. It's going to overflow. So Wikipedia states, lacuna, linguistics, a lexical gap in a language. Anyway, so we actually have a word for words that don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a word for something, that affects the way you think about it. Because you have to compare it to something else.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if we didn't have a word if we didn't have a word that described we don't have a word that describes the feeling of sunlight on skin.
Mm-hmm.
For example,
right.
That's a very unique kind of feeling. It's not the same as just heat, but it also isn't light itself. It's also not just sunlight. It's a very specific feeling that you get, maybe only at certain times of the year. But the fact that we have to use other words to describe it affects the way that we look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, at the very least, it affects it. I don't know if it dictates it, but it certainly affects it. What do you think?
I would agree. The question is, this one, Wikipedia page anyway, goes so far as to say it's decisions as well. It affects our decisions, which is interesting. I hadn't thought about that before.
Me either. That's something that I'd like to hear. I'd like to hear the argument for that.
Well,
because it does make sense to an extent.
Just the Wikipedia page alone, this is actually pretty huge. Like,
oh my gosh.
Like, there's a lot here.
Wow.
So, I mean, if you're interested, again, that's the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, Sapirwhorf.
Yeah, and if any of you know more about this than we do, by all means, please.
You can tell we know what we're talking about. We're on the internet. You can trust us.
Yeah, we definitely know what we're talking about. We are experts in things that we didn't know existed until 5 minutes ago or until we watched a movie about them.
I graduated with a degree in temporal physics.
I graduated with a degree in history. So I can tell you, I don't know.
I didn't actually graduate with a degree in temporal physics. It was music, which does have to do with time, but...
Does it?
Technically, yes, it does, very much so.
Okay, I couldn't tell you what temporal physics is.
I kind of techno-babbled. I made it up. It might be a thing. I'm looking it up now.
Now Nolan is looking up temporal physics. This podcast is going to be Nolan and Colton look up things on Wikipedia. That's going to be it's going to be what we do.
I see quantum physics. That is definitely a degree.
Okay.
Quantum physics. I don't see anything about temporal physics.
Is temporal physics even a thing? Like, does it exist?
I would assume that it exists in some degree or another. I don't know if there's a degree for it. Temporal. I don't even know what temporal physics. I mean,
I can't spell. It'd be temporal.
Temporal physics.
Yeah, it doesn't look like that actually exists. So Nolan just made up a new field of physics.
I mean, basically,
temporal
temporal
physics is physics that
something I've been studying for a long time. It's the idea that the time itself is another dimension, and that if you can understand the heptapodian language, then you know how to manipulate that dimension of space, and basically allows you to technobabble and make up crud on the fly like I am right now.
Fair enough. So I Googled temporal physics, and there isn't an actual hit for temporal physics.
What?
Oh, no, there is. Hold on.
Okay,
hold
that
on.
surprises me.
No. There is such a thing as temporal physics. Okay.
I know I'm not the first person to think of the words.
Okay, temporal physics does in fact exist to some extent, but the first thing here is about time travel.
Exactly. See? What I just said was all true.
So that takes us to a more important debate.
Just like how Obi-Wan told Luke that his father had been killed. That's true.
No one's going to listen to this
From
podcast,
a certain
Nolan.
point of view.
No one is going to listen to this podcast, Nolan.
Okay. Then it doesn't matter what I say.
I guess, apparently, because this is just going to disappear into the void like all of us. So,
what?
So this brings up a more important debate, frankly. And it stems from another film that I recently saw for the first time because I'm woefully behind on film, and I recognize that.
Okay.
I watched Finding Dory,
Oh, okay. I'm about halfway through it.
Okay, and I like it.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. It's not great. It's nothing too special, but it's good. It's a good film. At one point, Dory refers to the octopus. I forget his name.
Hank,
thank you.
Yeah.
Who has lost one of his arms. She refers to him as a septopus, which makes sense because 7.
Yes.
So, Nolan, are the heptapods in Arrival heptapods or septapods?
Wait, what?
And they're septopuses, heptapuses or septopuses?
Hepta.
Why do we have 2 different words for 7?
What?
Yeah, we have hepta things and septa things. They both refer to 7. Why do we have 2 of them?
Okay. So apparently, hept is from Greek origin, but sept. No, I don't. Apparently, it's an English word for division of family in a Scottish or Irish family. That's not what I'm worried about. Septa. Oh, septa. There we go, not sept. And now I'm getting a Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority.
I guess we have the same thing going on with 4, because we have quad and we have tetra, which also means 4.
Right.
Like a tetrahedron or a tetrapod is something that refers to 4. And same with quad, like a quadricep or a quadrilateral refers to 4 in some way or another.
What
is it? Oh,
well,
is
one
Latin
and
and
one's
one's
Greek? That's what I
Greek.
was wondering, but I couldn't find.
Yeah, we have the same. Actually, we have the same thing for like a whole bunch of them.
Okay,
like
that makes
bi and
sense.
di for 2, quin and pent for 5.
Mm-hmm.
Sex and hex for 6.
Because English.
English.
We are the language that takes other languages into the alley, mugs them for all they're worth, and then leaves them.
Yep. Just digs through their pockets for spare vocabulary. It's what we do.
Yeah.
As English speakers. And we're so bad at language with English. But English is gorgeous. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
it's beautiful in its little and like the more you study it and the more you read it and the more you use it, the more you recognize the beauty of its little oddities.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a pain to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just thinking about OUGH.
I mean, I didn't learn it till I was at least 3.
I know, right? Like, gosh, it takes so long to learn. And it was the first 3 years, you're just so confused. Like, what are these people saying? And why are there 8 different ways to pronounce OUGH?
Right.
It's so confusing.
I remember those days.
I mean,
it was rough.
I don't know how anybody learns it, but. And that's another thing, and that's another question that, I mean, I don't know if we'll have time to talk about it today, but I'm writing it down. Do we learn language based on repetition, or do we learn it because it makes sense?
Yeah.
Do we learn it through repetition or progression, I guess, is the question. Like, do we learn it because, like some things, like, we learn how to spell a lot of words just based on we see it all the time.
Right.
Like thought is not a phonetic word remotely. It's in THOUGHT. We learn to recognize it.
Yeah.
But other words like maybe longer words, compound words that have that the spelling might make more sense, but we don't know how to spell it intuitively the way we know how to spell certain shorter words.
Right.
So I wonder how much of language learning is repetitive versus like, oh, well, that makes sense because this part of speech or this way of spelling something or this prefix, suffix, root, whatever.
Right.
I wonder how much of that, especially with first languages versus second languages.
Mm-hmm. We're going to have our linguist friend on.
We are going to, you're talking about James?
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to have James on to talk about language because he knows more about language than we do.
Which, just a side note, in the future, just to give you an idea of how we're planning on doing this podcast, we are hoping to, whenever we put out a new episode, to have a segment, at least a segment, where we do have another person to speak with, anything they love. It might be linguistics, it might be video games, it might be history, or something specific like that, and we're just going to chat back and forth with them. We obviously don't today because this is episode 1.
Mm-hmm. And we might not for the first couple of episodes, just as we try to, figure out how to podcast.
Yep.
So, but that is something that we're planning on doing. We're going to open with a segment where we talk with each other, then we'll have a guest on for a while, and then we'll go from there.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think... I think...
we need to talk about one thing quick.
Okay.
Real quick. Pacific Rim. Because it got brought up. We have to talk about Pacific Rim. We have to put a plug in for Pacific Rim.
Do we have to plug Pacific Rim?
Yes, we have to. Okay. As you can clearly tell, we're at a very difference of opinion, Colton and I, on this.
That's because my opinion is the correct opinion.
And my opinion is the correct American opinion.
Oh my gosh.
So Pacific Rim is, I've heard it described as either the most awesome dumb movie or the dumbest awesomest movie of all time. One of the two. Because it is. It is a movie in which the plot is unbearable, the acting even more so, but the giant robots punching the giant sea aliens in the face.
It doesn't make any sense
at all. And it's beautiful. I mean, they're like picking up boats and using them as baseball bats. It satisfies something in my soul. And
I can't deal with that movie. It's just so bad.
It is so bad and
nonsensical.
so beautiful. I urge you all to watch it, and then after you've watched it once, you can go back and watch it again and again, and just do what my family does. Fast forward through any sequences that have to do with acting or storyline, and just get right to the parts where you see the giant robots and the giant aliens, and just watch them go at it.
This movie is about giant monsters emerging from the sea, which is absurd in its own way.
Aliens, not monsters. Aliens.
Whatever. It literally does not matter for this film. It
does it.
This film probably calls them both.
It might at one point.
It's so incontinuous that it probably does call them both aliens and monsters.
Technically, they're called kaiju, which, if I'm correct, is just the Japanese word for monster.
Wow. Mm-hmm. I mean, either way, so these monsters come out of the sea. So the logical thing to do is to build a wall?
No, that was the illogical thing. They needed to build more robots.
The first thing they do is to build a giant wall off the coast of California. Do you know?
And it didn't work. It was a dumb idea. I agree with you. It makes no sense. They should have built more giant robots because they were working.
But no, that's the worst part. So the wall breaks inevitably.
Yes,
because that's
it's a dumb idea.
National defense idea
ever.
It's a
stupid. Literally, make a wall around the entire Pacific Ocean. It's so dumb.
Stupid. Does anyone know how that would affect?
It's like 300 feet high. It's huge.
The effect on international shipping alone would render that wall so stupid. Like, does anyone think about the geopolitical ramifications of building a giant wall around the entire Pacific Ocean?
And it
to
doesn't
keep out
work.
These monsters, and then it doesn't work. The wall breaks like the first time they try to use it. It's like, well, there's several $billion down the drain.
Billion? That's probably pushing trillions, dude.
I mean, oh my goodness. And then, so then, this is what they do. Okay, this is what they do. Instead of developing some kind of super weapon or maybe even a biological weapon or something to fight these monsters, like these aren't humans. There aren't really rules for combat when, something wants to take out all of humanity. They build robots.
Awesome.
They build Neon Genesis Evangelion robots.
Awesome giant robots.
They climb in the robots and fight these monsters.
Punch the monsters in the face.
In giant mech suits.
It's like Power Rangers meets Godzilla.
It's so bad.
It's so good.
It's so nonsensical. Like, here's the thing.
It is.
If you wanted to set this up in some kind of futuristic universe where we actually could build massive mech suits that could fight monsters, or if you wanted to change things about the universe, this is the same problem that Arrival has. Frankly, it sets it in our time and expects us to suspend disbelief enough to think this story is even remotely believable. Like, I get that it's not, but the movie presents itself like it's taking itself seriously. Like, I hope and pray that it's not.
Here's
it can't be, can it?
It can't. But here's the major difference. The one essential difference between Arrival and Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim.
Arrival's pretty good.
Well, okay. They're both pretty good in their own beautiful way. Arrival sets out to be a very sophisticated, very poignant movie about linguistics, and then it gets into the time travel thing. But basically, the beginning, most of it, they're setting out to be a very serious movie that you can sit down and be like, oh, this is intellectually feeding me. Pacific Rim don't care about your brain. Pacific Rim cares about you seeing monster brains as the robots punch them in the face. It's an action film. The whole point is to entertain and to see giant things punching each other.
I guess, but oh my gosh, I struggled so. Maybe it's the confluence of the perfect storm of.
You just said confluence talking about Pacific Rim.
It's the bad acting.
Oh, it's awful.
The awful script.
The script is pathetic.
The if I remember correctly, the music wasn't bad.
The music is actually probably in terms of like artistic quality, is probably the best out of the entire thing.
It's really not hard to. I'm going to say that it's probably not hard to come up with something that sounds pretty epic over massive robots fighting massive lizard ocean monsters. Kaiju, thank you. Like, it's probably not hard to come up with something that sounds good over that. And to be fair, you're mostly hearing the creak of these giant, absurd metal things, the Iron Giant taking on these Godzilla things.
So good.
Like, come on, guys. Really?
Oh, it's really something. It's really awesome.
Oh, it's something. Like, I would encourage you to watch it if you want to see something that's so unbelievably absurd. Like, if absurdity is your bag, Pacific Rim might be for you. But it's because of the universe, though. It's because it tries to set itself up like this is actually like a legitimate response. It's not. Monty Python and the Holy Grail does not take itself remotely seriously, which is why it's great. It doesn't take itself seriously. It's not even pretending to. It's absurd and it's stupid. And it tries to be absurd and stupid, and it tells you from the get-go, this is absurd and stupid. Literally in the opening credits, it gets absurd and stupid. Pacific Rim like opens up like if you didn't know going in, the first 15 minutes of the movie, you might think this is like supposed to be like a legitimate action movie and it's just very poorly acted. But no!
Then you realize how awesome and truly fantastic it is once they get into their giant robots and begin just beating on each other. I'm going to transition because you could tell we're not going to agree on this one.
No, we're not going to agree on this one. And to be fair, I'm probably wrong. I'm willing to bet that I am
Please,
wrong.
all of you email us and tell Colton how wrong he is. I would appreciate that. Or email and tell me how wrong I am. You might think that, and that's totally fine too, but I think Pacific Rim's awesome.
I think the universe is going to agree with you. What does Rotten Tomatoes say about Pacific Rim? I want to know.
I don't even know. You can look that up.
All right.
I want to give us a plug for something else we're going to do in the future with this podcast is basically this person makes cool stuff segment just to kind of highlight something cool that someone's doing, whether it be technology or art or literature, just something cool that someone is making or discovering. And I don't necessarily have a specific name today. I just did this morning, so I wasn't totally prepared. But
the first podcast, and you're not ready for it.
I know. I'm sorry. We didn't even have a name till like right before this.
That's true.
So in the realm of Pacific Rim and alien films and things like that, apparently the developer Hankook Mirai Technology from South Korea has developed a robot suit.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. It's a mech robot suit. It is 13 feet tall, about 4 meters. And there is a video on livescience.com of CEO of Amazon, Jeff Bezos controlling
Jeff Bezos got in this giant mech robot.
In this giant mech suit, controlling its arms. It's like from the Blue People Avatar movie. It looks pretty fantastic. It's very much in the experimental phase, it seems. It's actually being held up from the ceiling with chains because it can't hold itself up yet. But it seems that they're just trying to show off some of the technologies that they've put into it. So if you want to look that up, again, livescience.com and giant mech robot. Look it up. It's pretty sweet. You can even see video footage of it.
So yeah, three quick things. One, I appreciate you making reference to Avatar, the Blue People movie.
If you've seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, you know there has to be a distinction made. And I'm not even going to mention what I was going to mention because there is no live-action Avatar: The Last Airbender movie.
Fair enough.
It doesn't exist.
So the second thing, Pacific Rim has 71% on Rotten Tomatoes.
It should have way more than that.
The critic consensus is that it may sport more style than substance, but Pacific Rim is a solid modern creature feature bolstered by fantastical imagery and an irresistible sense of fun. So it must just be that I'm not the audience then. I must just not be the audience for this film because everyone else seems to think like that this is fun and that this movie did a decent job of presenting itself as just a monster flick meant to be a good time, and they didn't have the same frustrations that I did.
Not everyone else. You're in the 29%.
I'm in the 29%. I am actually in the minority on this one, which it does not come as a surprise at all. The third thing is, so the segment that Nolan just did, what are we calling this segment again?
I don't know.
Oh, we were going to
make cool stuff.
Yeah, people make cool stuff.
I think that's what we're going with.
Yep, we're going to call it People Make Cool Stuff. And we're going to talk about people making cool stuff. And it's one of those it's something that it's going to be different every week. We're going to talk about writers. Sometimes we're going to talk about just random creations other weeks.
Yep.
Really good books, maybe really good albums, artistic endeavors, scientific endeavors, things like that. And it'll be different every week, but something maybe worth checking out because there are a lot of cool things in the world and lots of people are making lots of cool things.
Yep.
And we want to be a part of that.
Yep.
So, and if only just by sharing it because those things need to be shared because they're cool. And there are so many things that are coming at you every day and you get so many messages through so many social media avenues, through your email, just through talking with people, phone calls, text messages. You just get so much information thrown at you every day. Sometimes you might miss some of the cool things that are out there that there's just so much information you can't see it all. You'll miss some of those cool things. So this is what we're doing here is we're finding some of the things that we have found that maybe you have not heard of. These are going to be intentionally under the radar things that you may not have seen or may not have heard of.
Like giant mech robots.
Which isn't exactly little, but certainly under the radar, I guess, at least in this instance. So
if you want to watch technology.
If you want to watch Jeff Bezos control a giant mech robot. But yeah, that's what that segment is going to be for. So and that's going to be a weekly thing. So going forward, we're going to have that every week. We're going to have guests most weeks, probably, at least for a little bit. And and I say week, like we're going to record every week. We might not record every week, but yeah. So there it is. We are adults.
Wow.
Apparently. Look at us. As of now, the podcast started almost 56 minutes ago.
Dang.
At least
we talked for an hour.
That's before we make any cuts, so it'll probably be a little bit shorter than that. But I think most of it's actually going to get in.
An hour.
Yeah, we did talk.
We talked about Arrival.
That's not really weird though.
No.
We do this on a regular basis.
No, that's true. We just don't record ourselves doing it.
That's true.
Yeah.
So yeah, what you were saying?
Oh, I was just we talked about Arrival. We talked about Pacific Rim, alien movies, linguistics a little bit, plot development of movies, how movies work. Just kind of a taste of some of the stuff that we might be hitting in the future.
And what's the name what are we naming this podcast? What's the name?
Xeno. This has been just a minute. Xenoanthropology.
Xenoanthropology is what we talked about today on the podcast. So if you're trying to tell people what this podcast is about, you can say, "Oh, it's about xenoanthropology," and you will be right because, technically, because what xenoanthropology be what the study of beings that are foreign, I guess.
Essentially.
I guess. I mean, that's what it is, and that's what it is.
I would assume so.
So, yeah, there we go. So, we are adults.
And you can be an adult, too. Just email us.
Yeah, email us. weareadultspodcast@gmail.com. So, I think that's it for us today. Hopefully, you enjoyed the first episode. We'll be back with a second episode at some point. This is not going live right away. We're going to wait until we record a couple of episodes before we go live, and then we'll start having guests. But yeah, I believe that's it for us.
It's been fun.
So shoot for the outro?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
I win again. This has been Nolan McCausey.
And I'm Colton Wesley.
And we are adults. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
That's getting edited out because that's stupid.